The words slithered across the dining room in perfect Spanish, sharp and precise, meant to cut deep if only I could understand them. But they didn't know about my secret lessons, didn't realize I'd spent the last year learning their language. Every syllable landed like a dagger as I stood frozen in the hallway, wine bottle clutched against my chest. "She can't be included in the will," Linda's voice carried through the crack in the door. "Mark's mansion belongs in Spanish blood. We need to make sure she never finds out about the inheritance clause." "David won't like it," Ethan replied, his usual jovial tone replaced by something colder. "He actually loves the girl. My son will understand once we explain. Family legacy matters more than some American wife he barely knows. I'm Nora, and until 30 seconds ago, I thought I was finally breaking through with my mother-in-law. 12 months of perfect smiles, helping with family events, learning their language in secret to surprise them all. Now the crystal wine bottle felt like it might shatter in my trembling grip. "The lawyer said we need to act fast," Linda continued, "before Mark changes his mind about the property distribution. That old fool's getting sentimental about Nora's dedication to the family." Her laugh was bitter coffee and broken glass. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my heels from clicking on the hardwood as I backed away. The dining room door remained cracked open, spilling warm light and cold truths into the darkened hallway. Voices continued their plotting, but blood rushed too loudly in my ears to make out the words. My back hit the kitchen island. I set the wine down before I could drop it, gripping the counter's edge until my knuckles went white. David's face flashed in my mind, his warm brown eyes, the way he'd kissed me this morning before heading to work. Did he know? Was my husband part of this scheme to cut me out of his uncle's will? "Nora, everything okay in here?" I spun around to find Rachel, David's sister, watching me with concern. She held an empty serving dish, clearly on her way to the kitchen for seconds. How long had she been standing there? "Fine," I managed, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Just getting more wine for dinner." I grabbed the bottle again, plastering on the smile I'd perfected over months of family gatherings. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. "You look pale, did you hear?" "We need that wine!" Linda's voice boomed as she swept into the kitchen, Ethan close behind. Her face showed no trace of the venom I'd heard moments ago. "Everyone's glasses are getting low, dear. What's taking so long?" I lifted the bottle, letting the crystal catch the light. "Just admiring Uncle Mark's excellent taste. He always brings the best vintages to family dinner." Linda's smile flickered for just a moment. "Yes, well, Mark has always been generous, when it suits him." She plucked the wine from my hands and gestured toward the dining room. "Shall we?" I followed her back to the table where David sat discussing business with Uncle Mark. My husband's face lit up when I took my seat beside him, his hand finding mine under the table. The touch that usually brought comfort now raised questions that burned in my throat. How much did he know? How long had they been planning this? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? I watched Linda pour the wine with practiced grace, her rings catching the light as she moved around the table. She taught me that proper Spanish families always serve their guests first, one of many lessons in her endless crusade to mold me into her vision of a suitable daughter-in-law. Now I understood. I was never meant to fit in. I was meant to be managed, contained, and ultimately excluded. I raised my glass when Mark proposed a toast to family and smiled as the others echoed the sentiment. But beneath the table, my free hand curled into a fist. They wanted to play games with inheritance and blood? Fine. I'd show them exactly how well I'd learned to play. The wedding photo mocked me from its silver frame, David and I beaming at each other under Spanish sunlight. I traced the edge of the frame, remembering how Linda had insisted on displaying it prominently in our living room. "To show everyone how beautifully you've joined our family," she'd said. Now those words carried a different weight. 3 days had passed since the dinner, 3 days of pretending nothing had changed while everything had shattered. David noticed something was off, he always did, but I deflected his concerns with practiced smiles and casual excuses about work stress. My phone buzzed. A message from Linda. "Lunch tomorrow at the club? Just us girls." The audacity almost made me laugh. I typed back "wouldn't miss it" while my other hand clenched into a fist. "You're doing that thing again," David said from behind me, making me jump. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, loosening his tie. "That thing where you're somewhere else entirely." "Just tired." I set the phone down, screen dark. "How was your meeting with Uncle Mark?" Something flickered across David's face, so brief I almost missed it. "Postponed. Mother needed him for something urgent about the estate." Of course she did. I watched David move around our room, his movements precise and controlled like always. He'd learned that from Linda, that careful way of holding himself that revealed nothing. I was thinking, I said, keeping my voice light. Maybe we could visit the mansion this weekend. I'd love to see those gardens Uncle Mark mentioned. David paused halfway through hanging up his jacket. This weekend might not work. Mother's planning some renovation discussions with Mark. She seems very involved with his property lately. She's family. His tone carried a slight edge. It's natural to be concerned about these things. I stood up, moving to help him with his tie like I always did. Our evening ritual. His skin was warm under my fingers as I worked the silk loose. And what am I? What? Am I family too? His hands caught mine, stilling them. Nora, where is this coming from? I met his eyes, searching for any sign he knew about his mother's plans. But David's gaze was clear, concerned, and completely unreadable, just like Linda had taught him. Nowhere, I said, pulling away. Just being silly. My phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. Need to talk. Coffee tomorrow before your lunch with Mom? Interesting. I replied with a quick yes, ignoring David's questioning look. I'm going to take a shower, I announced, needing space to think. But David caught my arm as I passed. Hey, he said softly. You know you can tell me anything, right? For a moment, I almost did. Almost let the truth spill out about his mother's schemes, Ethan's complicity, the Spanish conversations they thought I couldn't understand. But then I remembered Linda's voice in the dining room. My son will understand once we explain. They were so sure of their control over him. Were they right? I stretched up and kissed his cheek instead. I know. The lie tasted bitter, but I swallowed it down. In the shower, I let hot water drum against my shoulders while planning tomorrow's conversations. Rachel wanting to meet first couldn't be a coincidence. The question was whether she was an ally or another piece in Linda's game. When I emerged, David was on his phone speaking rapid Spanish. He switched to English when he saw me, but not before I caught madre and mansión in the mix. Mother says she's looking forward to lunch tomorrow, he said after hanging up. She wants to discuss some family traditions she thinks you'd enjoy learning. I bet she does. I smiled, remembering my Spanish teacher's words about the importance of patience in mastering a language. That sounds wonderful. I'm always eager to learn more about proper Spanish family values. David beamed, clearly pleased by my enthusiasm. He had no idea each word was a weapon I was sharpening. Later, lying beside him in the dark, I listened to his steady breathing and thought about the choices ahead. Tomorrow I'd meet Rachel, then Linda. 2 conversations that could change everything. I touched my wedding ring, remembering our vows. For better or worse, we'd promised. I wondered if David had known then just how much worse things could get. My phone lit up one last time. A message from Uncle Mark. Be careful who you trust, Pequeña. Even family can wear masks. I turned off the phone and closed my eyes, but sleep stayed far away. Rachel's coffee sat untouched between us, steam rising in accusatory spirals. They've been planning this for months, she said, sliding her phone across the cafe table. Look at the timestamp on these messages. My hands didn't shake as I scrolled through the WhatsApp conversation between Linda and Ethan. Perfect Spanish grammar discussing perfect plans to manipulate Uncle Mark's inheritance. The timestamps went back to my wedding day. Why show me this now? Rachel's fingers drummed against her cup. Because yesterday, Mother asked me to be a witness for some legal documents about the mansion. She leaned forward, voice dropping. They're trying to prove Mark is mentally unfit to manage his estate. The cafe's morning chatter faded to white noise. I handed back her phone, mind racing through implications. Does David know? David knows what Mother wants him to know. Rachel's smile was bitter, just like always. My phone buzzed, Linda confirming our lunch. The screen showed a photo of her and me from last Christmas, both smiling. I deleted it with one swipe. There's more, Rachel said. Check Mark's Instagram activity from last night. I pulled up his profile, noting several new posts about the mansion's renovation. The latest photo stopped my breath. David and Linda standing in Mark's study, examining papers spread across his antique desk. The caption read, Family Business Meetings, Time to Secure Our Legacy. The timestamp 3 a.m. He told me that meeting was canceled, I said, my voice strange in my ears, that he was home sleeping. Rachel's expression softened. Nora, there's something else you should... The cafe door chimed. Ethan walked in, spotting us immediately. His surprise looked rehearsed. What a delightful coincidence. He moved toward our table with practiced charm. Rachel, dear, your mother's been trying to reach you about those documents. I bet she has. Rachel stood, gathering her things. She caught my eye briefly. Think about what I said, Nora, about everything. I watched her leave, noting how Ethan's smile never reached his eyes. He took her vacant seat without asking. Lovely morning for coffee, he said in Spanish, testing me. Though I hear the club serves better brew, Linda's quite looking forward to lunch. I matched his language, letting my accent slip just enough to be noticeable. So am I. Will you be joining us, Ethan? His pause was microscopic but telling. Unfortunately not. Business calls. He switched to English. Though I hear you and David might be interested in some property discussions soon, Linda mentioned, "How is the mansion renovation going?" I interrupted, watching his face. The Instagram photos look fascinating, especially the late-night meetings. Something calculated moved behind his eyes. Social media can be misleading. Pictures don't tell whole stories. No, I agreed, standing, but timestamps rarely lie. I left him sitting there, feeling his gaze follow me out. In my car, I pulled up my laptop and logged into the family's shared cloud drive, access courtesy of David's saved passwords. Linda's meticulous filing system made it easy to find the legal documents. Draft papers declaring Uncle Mark incompetent, witness statements ready for signatures, property transfer arrangements dated 3 months before my wedding. My phone buzzed again. David, Mother says you're meeting for lunch. Everything okay? I thought about his face in that 3 a.m. photo, bent over papers that would destroy his uncle's legacy. Thought about all the nights he'd lied about where he was, what he was doing. Another message arrived. Uncle Mark this time. Need to talk. Come to the mansion. Now. I started the car, mind already mapping out what I needed to know, what evidence to gather. The mansion was only 15 minutes away. Linda wouldn't expect me at the club for another hour. My phone lit up once more. Rachel. Be careful, there are more players in this game than you know. I pulled into traffic, heading toward the mansion's familiar gates. They'd all underestimated me, thought I was just the American wife who couldn't understand their precious Spanish, their family schemes, their legacy games. Time to show them exactly how wrong they were. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows watching like dark eyes. Uncle Mark stood waiting at the entrance, his expression grim. You figured it out, haven't you? He asked as I approached. Parts of it, I replied. But I have a feeling you're about to tell me the rest. He nodded, opening the heavy door. Come inside, Pequeña. Let me show you what they're really fighting for. Uncle Mark's study smelled of old leather and secrets. He spread photographs across his desk, not the staged family portraits Linda loved, but surveillance shots. Linda and Ethan entering law offices, David at late-night meetings, documents changing hands in parking lots. I've been watching them for months, Mark said, tapping one photo. Ever since they started pushing for power of attorney. My fingers traced the edge of a photo showing David accepting an envelope from Ethan. The timestamp matched our anniversary dinner. You knew everything. Not everything, Mark's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before, but enough to know they're after more than just the mansion. Sophie's text lit up my phone. Where are you? Linda's at the club, furious you missed lunch. I silenced the phone, focusing on the evidence before me. What else are they after? Mark pulled out a leather portfolio. The real estate holdings are just the surface. There's a foundation, set up by my father. Old money, carefully hidden. His laugh was bitter. Linda always thought she could charm her way into controlling it. And David? David, Mark hesitated. Show her, Rachel. I turned to find Rachel in the doorway holding a USB drive. She must have followed me here. These are the real documents, she said, plugging it into Mark's laptop. The ones Mother and Ethan don't know I copied. The screen filled with contracts, emails, bank statements. My husband's signature appeared on papers dated weeks before our wedding, agreeing to terms I couldn't quite grasp. They're using your marriage, Rachel said quietly. American wife, international property laws. If they can prove Mark incompetent and you unfit to inherit, the foundation money stays in Spanish control. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That's why Linda pushed so hard for the wedding to happen quickly. My phone buzzed again. David, Mother says you missed lunch. Everything okay? Call me. Mark watched me stare at the message. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at the evidence spread across the desk. My husband's betrayal documented in times, dates, and signatures. I need to talk to Sophie. Careful, Rachel warned. She's been having lunch with Mother twice a month since your wedding. The floor seemed to tilt. Sophie, my best friend, my confidant, the person I'd trusted with every doubt about Linda's behavior. You're sure? Rachel pulled up surveillance photos on her phone. Sophie and Linda at expensive restaurants, heads bent together over papers. Mother likes to hedge her bets. I gripped the edge of Mark's desk, steadying myself. Why are you helping me? Because I'm tired of watching Mother destroy people for money. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. And because you're the first person who might actually be able to stop her. My phone lit up again. Linda this time. Darling, we simply must discuss the Foundation's annual gala. Call immediately. The gala, of course, the perfect public venue for announcing Mark's condition and their new control of the estate. When is it? I asked. 3 weeks, Mark replied. They're planning to make their move then. I picked up one of the surveillance photos. Linda and Ethan laughing with Sophie at some cafe I'd never seen. The betrayal burned cold in my chest, crystallizing into something harder than hurt. Rachel, I said, I need access to Mother's social media accounts. All of them. She smiled, pulling out her laptop. Already have them, and Ethan's too. Mark? I turned to him. How do you feel about making some very public posts about the Foundation's future? He leaned back, studying me. What exactly did you have in mind? I pulled up Linda's Instagram, where she'd carefully crafted their perfect family image. I think it's time for some truth to leak out, starting with these documents Rachel found. They'll fight back, Mark warned. Let them. I started typing, watching Linda's carefully curated world prepare to unravel. They wanted to play games with family loyalty? Fine, let's see how they handle a real scandal. Rachel's phone chimed. Ethan, asking about the witness documents. She showed me the message, eyebrows raised. Tell him you'll meet tomorrow, I said. We need them thinking everything's still under control. As Rachel typed her response, I looked at the photo of David again, the envelope passing between hands on our anniversary night. The hurt was still there, but something else had replaced it, something cold and precise and ready. One more thing, I said to Mark. I need everything you have on Sophie's involvement. Every meeting, every document, every conversation. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Planning to start with the weakest link? No, I replied, watching Linda's social media notifications start to ping. Planning to end with it. Sophie's contact photo flashed on my phone for the third time that morning. I watched it ring out, focusing instead on Linda's Instagram feed scrolling across my laptop. Rachel sat beside me at Mark's desk, monitoring the growing chaos on other platforms. Mother's trying to delete the posts, Rachel said, fingers flying across her keyboard. But I've got screenshots circulating faster than she can catch them. The documents we'd leaked, carefully selected pages showing Linda and Ethan's plans for Mark's estate, had sparked exactly the firestorm we'd expected. Their carefully curated social circle was imploding with questions and accusations. David's calling again, I said, watching my husband's name light up the screen. He sounds desperate. Let him sweat. Rachel's voice carried an edge I was starting to recognize. He made his choice when he signed those papers. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Please talk to me, I can explain everything. Speaking of choices, Rachel nodded at the message. Ready for phase 2? I pulled up the surveillance photos of Sophie's secret meetings with Linda. Set up the lunch, make sure Linda knows nothing about it. Rachel typed quickly, then paused. Ethan's posting damage control, says the documents are fake, claims someone's trying to destroy the family's reputation. I smiled, remembering Linda's own words from that first dinner. Family legacy matters more than some American wife he barely knows. The mansion's doorbell chimed. Mark's voice carried from downstairs, followed by familiar footsteps. David. He's not supposed to be here, Rachel hissed, closing her laptop. Mother must have sent him. I stood, straightening my spine. Good, let's see what story they've given him to tell. David burst into the study, his usual composure shattered. What the hell is happening? Mother's hysterical, Ethan's threatening lawyers, and you're not answering your phone. Interesting priorities, I replied in Spanish, watching his face. Your mother's hysteria comes first? He flinched at my perfect accent. How long have you? Long enough. I gestured to the surveillance photos spread across Mark's desk. Want to explain that envelope from our anniversary night? Color drained from his face as he recognized the image. Nora, I can explain. Can you explain Sophie too? I pushed forward a photo of him meeting my best friend and his mother at a restaurant I'd never seen. Or should I ask her at lunch tomorrow? You don't understand. He stepped closer, reaching for me. Mother said it was to protect the family's interests. The family? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him step back. You mean the family that's been planning to declare your uncle mentally unfit? The family that used our marriage as a legal shield for fraud? Rachel moved to stand beside me, her presence steady. David's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. Rachel, you're part of this? I'm part of stopping it, she corrected. Someone has to. My phone lit up again, Ethan this time. The message preview showed panic. Need to talk. Linda's losing control. The foundation board is asking questions. Perfect. Your mother's house of cards is falling, I told David, switching back to English. The question is, whose side will you choose when it collapses? There aren't sides, he protested. We're family. Family doesn't conspire to destroy each other. Mark's voice cut through the room as he entered. Your mother forgot that lesson long ago. David's face crumpled as Mark laid out more evidence. Years of manipulation, secret accounts, planned betrayals. Each revelation seemed to age him, stripping away the polished facade his mother had crafted. My phone buzzed continuously now. Sophie, Linda, Ethan, all desperate to contain what couldn't be contained. I thought of Linda's smug smile at that first dinner, thinking I couldn't understand their plots and plans. The foundation board meets tomorrow, Mark announced. They'll want answers about these documents. Mother will find a way to explain, David said weakly. She always does. Not this time. I pulled up Linda's social media accounts where her carefully constructed image was unraveling comment by comment. The truth doesn't need explanation. David stared at the screen, watching his mother's world collapse in real time. What do you want? Want? I thought of all the dinners, all the subtle insults, all the schemes. I want exactly what your mother taught me about family legacy, that it belongs to those strong enough to protect it. His phone rang. Linda again. David looked at me, then at the evidence of his betrayal spread across the desk, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. The phone kept ringing as the sun set through Mark's study windows, casting long shadows across our fractured family portrait. The foundation boardroom felt like a tomb, all mahogany and money and dead silence. I sat across from Linda, watching her perfectly manicured nails tap against her water glass. Ethan flanked her left, David her right, a united front of familiar betrayal. These accusations are groundless, Linda's lawyer declared, spreading documents across the table. The supposed evidence has been doctored, clearly an attempt to destabilize the foundation's leadership. I didn't speak, just pulled up the surveillance photos on the boardroom's display screen. Linda with Sophie, David accepting envelopes, Ethan's secret meetings. The timestamp on each photo felt like another nail in their coffin. Circumstantial, Ethan snapped, but his voice wavered. The board members exchanged glances. These weren't Linda's usual sycophants. These were old money, old power, old secrets. Perhaps, the board chairman said, we should hear from Mark himself. The door opened, but instead of Mark, Sophie walked in. My stomach dropped. She wouldn't meet my eyes as she took her seat next to Linda's lawyer. Miss Chen has provided sworn testimony, the lawyer announced, about certain irregularities in how this evidence was obtained. The photos vanished from the screen, replaced by documents I'd never seen. Emails in my name, bank transfers. Carefully constructed proof that I'd orchestrated everything to steal control of the foundation. That's impossible, I started, but Sophie finally looked at me, her expression a perfect mask of regret. I'm sorry, Nora, she said softly, but I have to tell the truth about what you asked me to do. The betrayal tasted like copper in my mouth. I looked at Rachel, but she was staring at her phone, face pale. Mark's been in an accident, she whispered. He's in surgery. Linda's smile widened fractionally. Of course, the one person who could corroborate everything, conveniently silenced. Given these developments, the chairman began, and considering Mark's unfortunate inability to attend... Wait, David's voice cut through the room. He stood, pulling out his phone. Before we continue, I have something you need to hear. A recording played, Linda's voice, crystal clear. Once we have control of the foundation, we can move the assets wherever we want. Mark won't be able to stop us once the doctors declare him unfit. Linda's face went rigid. David, what are you doing? What I should have done months ago. He looked at me for the first time since entering the room. I'm choosing a side. You're choosing wrong, Ethan snarled, reaching for the phone, but David stepped back. The recording's already uploaded, he said. Along with everything else, the real documents, the actual plans, everything. Sophie stood abruptly. I need to amend my testimony. Sit down, Linda commanded, but Sophie moved toward me instead. I'm sorry, she whispered. They threatened my family's business, but David showed me proof they were lying about that too. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Linda's lawyer frantically checking his phone, board members whispering, Ethan trying to reach David's phone. Then Rachel's phone lit up again. Mark's out of surgery, she announced, and he's asking for the board chairman. Says he has video testimony recorded yesterday, in case anything happened to him. Linda's glass shattered in her grip, water spreading across the mahogany like blood. You really think you've won? She hissed at me in Spanish. You think these people will ever truly accept you? You're nothing but a foreign gold digger who got lucky. I leaned forward, matching her language perfectly. No, Linda, I'm the daughter-in-law you taught too well. The one who learned exactly how your family handles betrayal. The chairman's phone rang, Mark's doctor. As he answered, I watched Linda's carefully constructed world crumble in real time. Her lawyer gathering his things, board members stepping away, her own son standing firmly beside me. But something in her eyes made me pause. That familiar calculation, that hint of a deeper plan. Check on Mark, I told Rachel urgently. Now. As she rushed out, Linda's smile returned, razor thin and deadly. Family legacy matters more than anything, dear, and some legacies can't be stolen, only destroyed. My phone buzzed. Rachel again. Mark's gone. The nurse says someone tampered with his medication. Police are on their way. The foundation boardroom suddenly felt smaller, darker. Linda's smile grew as she stood, gathering her things with elegant precision. Such a tragedy, she said softly. I wonder who they'll blame. The sound of sirens grew in the distance as David grabbed my arm, urgency in his grip. We need to leave. Now. But Linda blocked the door, her victory absolute in the dying light of day. No, dear, I don't think anyone's going anywhere. The hospital corridor stretched endless and white as I ran, Rachel's footsteps echoing behind me. Mark's room number burned in my mind, 507. But when we reached it, 2 police officers blocked the door. Nobody enters, one said. This is a crime scene. Through the window, I could see medical staff working frantically around Mark's bed. The monitors showed flat lines where there should have been peaks. He's not dead. Rachel's voice cracked. The nurse said he was stable. My phone buzzed. David. Mother's gone, Ethan too. The board members are talking to the police. The elevator dinged. Linda emerged, her designer heels clicking against sterile tiles. She'd changed clothes. No trace of the boardroom confrontation remained. Officers, she called out, voice breaking perfectly. That's my brother-in-law. Please, we need to be with him. Ma'am, we can't. Check his medical directive, she interrupted, producing documents. I'm his legal proxy. The officers examined the papers while Linda caught my eye, her smile razor thin. Such a tragedy, she said in Spanish. First the foundation scandal, now this. The stress must have been too much for him. The medication was tampered with, I replied in the same language. They'll trace it. Will they? The security cameras in this wing malfunctioned an hour ago. Such unreliable technology these days. Rachel's phone chimed. She grabbed my arm, showing me the screen. A live news alert about Mark's sudden collapse following accusations of mental instability. You're going to pin this on me, I realized. The disgruntled daughter-in-law, angry about being cut out of the will. Linda's smile widened fractionally. The evidence is quite compelling. Your fingerprints on his water glass, your recent hostile emails, your public threats about exposing family secrets. Officers, a detective approached, nodding to Linda. We need to ask Miss Walker some questions. Mrs. Castellanos, Linda corrected smoothly, though perhaps not for much longer given the circumstances. The detective reached for my arm, but Rachel stepped between us. Wait, show them the video, Nora. Linda's composure cracked slightly. What video? I pulled out my phone, hands steady. Mark wasn't just recording testimony yesterday, he was recording you. The screen lit up with footage from Mark's study. Linda and Ethan discussing the foundation, the planned accident, everything, the timestamp less than 24 hours ago. That's inadmissible, Linda snapped. Illegally obtained. Not illegal when it's his house, his study, his security system, Rachel's voice carried down the corridor, and not the only copy. The elevator dinged again. David emerged with the board chairman and 2 more detectives. Mrs. Castellanos, one detective said, we need you to come with us. Linda's mask finally shattered. She lunged for my phone, but Rachel was faster, backing away with the device already streaming to the cloud. You think this changes anything? Linda hissed, switching to Spanish as the detectives approached. You'll never belong here. This family will never truly be yours. You're right, I replied, watching her perfect world crumble. I don't want to belong to your version of family anymore. A commotion erupted from Mark's room. The monitors had changed, peaks where there were flat lines before. He's stabilizing, a nurse called out. Whatever they gave him, the antidote worked. Linda went pale as Mark's eyes fluttered open. He turned his head slightly, gaze finding mine through the window. The real medical directive, Rachel whispered, pulling out another set of documents. The one Mother didn't forge. Mark made me his proxy last week. The detectives were reading Linda her rights now, but I barely heard them. Mark's hand moved weakly, beckoning me closer. The officers finally stepped aside, letting me enter. Did we get her? He asked, voice rough. Yes, I said, taking his hand. It's over. Not quite. He squeezed my fingers. There's still the matter of the will, the real one. Linda's protests echoed down the corridor as they led her away, her carefully constructed legacy dissolving with each step. David appeared in the doorway, looking lost. Nora, Later, I said, not ready for that conversation yet. Some betrayals needed time to heal. Mark's monitors beeped steadily now, each sound a reminder that sometimes family isn't what you're born into or marry into. It's what you choose to build from the ashes of what burns. The mansion study looked different in morning light. Gone were the surveillance photos and damning documents, replaced by fresh flowers and the day's newspapers. Each headline told the same story. Linda and Ethan's arrest, the foundation scandal, Mark's miraculous recovery. I traced the edge of Mark's desk, remembering that first night I'd overheard their Spanish whispers about inheritance and legacy. The wood felt warmer now, less threatening. The board approved everything, Rachel said, entering with a stack of papers. The foundation's yours to manage, along with Mark's voting shares. And Linda? Refusing visitors, even David. Rachel set down a familiar silver frame, my wedding photo. He's outside, you know. Says he'll wait as long as it takes. I picked up the frame, studying our frozen smiles. Some things can't be fixed with waiting. No, Mark's voice came from the doorway as he wheeled himself in, already fighting against doctor's orders to rest. But some things are worth rebuilding. He handed me an envelope, the real will, dated weeks before the dinner where everything began. My hands didn't shake as I opened it. I knew Linda would try something eventually, Mark said. But I needed to see who would stand up to her, who would fight not for money, but for what's right. The document was simple, direct. The mansion and foundation shares split between Rachel and me, with provisions for David contingent on choices he had yet to make. Sophie appeared in the doorway next, hesitant. The police need my final statement about Linda's threats. Tell them everything, I said, not looking up from the will. The whole truth this time. She lingered. Nora, I know why you did it, but knowing isn't the same as forgetting. She nodded, understanding the weight of what couldn't be undone, and left quietly. Rachel's phone buzzed. Ethan's lawyer, requesting a meeting. He's offering to testify against Mother in exchange for leniency. Let him, Mark said. The truth has its own momentum now. A soft knock drew our attention. David stood in the doorway, looking lost without his mother's influence shadowing him. The reporters want statements about the Foundation's future. Tell them it's returning to its original mission, Mark answered, supporting education for immigrant families, starting with Spanish language programs. I felt David's eyes on me, remembering all those secret lessons I'd taken, preparing for a family that never intended to accept me. I should have chosen differently, David said quietly in Spanish. Should have been stronger. Yes, I replied in English. You should have. Rachel touched my arm. The detective's here with the last of Linda's papers from the safe deposit box. I gathered the will and wedding photo, ready to leave the study that had started everything. But David blocked the doorway. What happens now, he asked, with us? I looked at our wedding photo one last time, then set it face down on Mark's desk. Now you learn what your mother never could, that real family isn't about control or legacy or perfect appearances. It's about choices. And second chances? Hope crept into his voice. Maybe, but not today. I moved past him, following Rachel toward the detective, waiting with one final box of Linda's secrets. Behind me, I heard Mark speaking softly to his nephew in Spanish, something about growth and redemption and time. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows that felt less like threats and more like possibilities. Linda had taught me everything about destroying family bonds, but she'd never understood how to build them. That would be my legacy now. Rachel fell into step beside me, already discussing foundation plans and renovation ideas. The detective waited patiently, another box of truth ready to be unpacked. Somewhere in the city, Linda sat in a cell, plotting or perhaps finally learning. And in my pocket, Mark's will carried not just inheritance, but choice, the power to shape whatever came next. Not for revenge anymore, but for something stronger. The mansion's front door stood open to the morning, and for the first time since that dinner so long ago, I felt no need to translate my thoughts into another language. My truth was clear enough in any tongue. I stepped into the light, ready to build something new from all that had burned away.